my family, and that really scared me. And you know, making matters worse, at the time, if you turned on television and you listened to politics, and we liked to listen to the news in my family, you heard people like Anita Bryant, you heard people out there with these anti-gay quotes saying that somehow gay and lesbian people hurt children, and they were marching across the country, overturning any protections for gay and lesbian people. And we're talking about basic protections, to stay in your home, to keep your job. And it wasn't just conservatives, not at all. People from the left were jumping into with their own anti-gay quotes, because this was a new hot issue, and people were actually showing up for it. So I'd heard from my school, I'd heard from my church, I'd heard from the folks in politics. I knew difference was not good, and I had reason to be afraid. And I only, you know, so I shrank and I hid, you know, I tried not to stick out or excel, and that led me to have one friend, and his name was Troy. Right? And Troy wore husky jeans. And Troy had one of those pop-up pools in the backyard. And I'd go over to Troy's house and we'd swim around with the mask on, the goggles, and all that. And one day I could tell that something was bothering Troy. And I said, "Hey, what's wrong?" And he said, "Oh, my mom thinks I should tell you something about me." I said, "Sure, all right, go for it. What's up?" And he said, I'm Jewish. And I didn't know, I'd never heard of a Jewish before. I didn't know what a Jewish was, right? But it sounded awfully different, and I'd learned different wasn't good, and different was something to be afraid of. And so I turned to him and I said, I think you can change that. Right? And I watched his heart break right there in front of me. You know, I'd just done to him exactly what everyone had been doing to me. I told him that difference wasn't good, and it was something to hide and be afraid of. And all of a sudden, I didn't have one friend. I had no friends. And I shrank and hid more, and the isolation was very scary. And I'll tell you, you know, I contemplated doing some dire things. That should come as no surprise. LGBT kids are still 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than their straight brothers and sisters. But that takes me to my next story, because that's not how my story ended. And my next story is about the power of your story, the power of all of our own personal stories. Because what happened next is my mom met this really cute army soldier who was Catholic, a really good Catholic, because he didn't just go to church on Christmas, he also went on Easter. Yeah, he was awesome, and he had orders to ship out to the Bay Area. And we moved to California, and I went into theater classes, and I, for the very first time, heard the story of this guy named Harvey Milk. And this guy named Harvey Milk was this openly gay guy. I was like, what do you mean openly gay guy? That's just someone who wants to get his butt kicked, right? But no, this guy was actually out there leading with hope instead of fear. Hope instead of fear, and his brand of hope actually included me. And it gave me a little bit of guts, a little bit of strength to be who I was. Not enough to come out, but enough to drive from here down to that little town you might have heard of called West Hollywood. You ever heard of that? Yeah, well, I went down there and I met a bunch of gay and lesbian people, and they didn't have the horns that the Mormon prophet had told me that they were going to have, and they seemed rather well adjusted. And I actually met one of these gays, and I was into much older guys at the time. He was 22 years old and a grad student. And I worked so hard to get him to see me as anything but a friend, but he just wouldn't. He wouldn't. And so I worked hard, and I worried about it for about 2 years, and literally I was flying home to where my family now lived, out in Washington, D.C., over the Christmas break of my senior year of college. And I realized, as I'm thinking about this grad student, that I don't know what I'm going to talk about at Christmas this year, right? Because I have this very sort of, this family, we like to talk about everything, but all of a sudden I can't talk about what matters most to me at all.